Welcome to the Fire Mountain Gems and Beads studio. I'm Lisa Pavelka, and today, boy do I have a project for you. We're going to be our own steampunk factory. If you like the look of steampunk, or you even want to make your own little micro artifacts, that's what I'm here to show you how to do. Steampunk's wonderful, and the watch parts that you can find in vintage watches are a lot of fun to work with. But what if you can't find them? What if you want them in a different color, different metalized color, or just a different bright, vibrant color altogether? What if you want them to look like an ancient artifact, like it's rusted and old? Well, you can do all that, and that's what we're going to start doing right now. And it all begins with Fimo Professional clay. We're just going to work with black, and we're going to work with my mylar back foils for clay. These are great for all types of clay, but we're using them in polymer, but they're wonderful for epoxy sculpt. We're also going to use my good friend Christy Friesen's Swelligant. Why? Because it's swell. And we're going to work with some mica powders and my texture stamps. So many wonderful, fun things to play with and so much to do. So let's get started. So I'm going to show you, first of all, how you can make metalized steampunk components. And we've rolled out, after we've conditioned, some black polymer clay. We've rolled it on a very thin setting on our machine. For most machines, usually about the 5th or 6th largest setting will do. If you've got a machine with even higher settings than 9, you might want to even go on your 7th largest setting. So we like to work on a smooth ceramic tile because this is one of those times I like my clay to stick to my work surface. And I've selected out of the Expression set of foil, but you can use any of the foils you like. They come in so many sets. The gold, this is one sheet out of 6 that comes in Expressions, and it's 4 by 8 inches long, so you can make a lot of steampunk with this. And we're going to place it with the color side facing up. Even though, as you can see, I'm just foiling a very small piece of clay, don't cut a tiny piece of foil. It's going to be hard to get it to stick if you don't have mylar to pull it from. Now we're going to take a piece of scrap paper, or I call it burnishing paper, and it can be anything. It can be a piece of paper towel, Kleenex, just scrap paper, or a piece of parchment paper like I have here. Notice how I'm just using the flat pads of my fingers, not my fingertips, and I'm applying pressure to create heat and friction. That paper is just creating a barrier so that I can get that friction built up and a lot of warmth between the foil and the clay. Body oils, lotion, clay residue, they all help make it hard to get the foil to stick to polymer clay. So after you've burnished for about 30 to 60 seconds, you want to pay attention to where you're ripping it from. I said ripping, not pulling. So we're going to do this really fast. Ready? We're going to go this direction. Make sure you don't have your coffee sitting there. Now you can see that most of the foil laid down, but some of it didn't. That's okay. That's why it was important to pay attention to which way we were ripping from. We're just going to place it back in there and match those little spots, and we're going to reburnish for, sometimes only you need 15 seconds, but I usually recommend that 30 to 60. But reburnish, I'm going to pay a little extra attention to that one corner that didn't stick very well at all. Now, here's the tip. The next time we go to rip it, we're going to rip it from a different direction. Doesn't have to be the opposite, just different. Let's see if that worked better. A little bit better. And I lost some of my pieces here. That's okay. They're easy to find. But I've got enough here to make quite a few pieces of my steampunk with the foil effect. And we're going to take our clay blade, holding at a 45-degree angle, and just slide it back and forth. That's nice and thin, but we didn't want to tear it or stretch it or distort it. I don't worry sometimes if I don't fill in all the areas, especially for a project like this, but sometimes it takes more than 2 times to get all the foil to lay down. Now I'm working with my favorite stamps for this type of technique. You can see I've got one of my steampunk stamps here. I've got the innie. Now the outie, if you want to get this keyhole effect, you can only get this using the technique I'm about to show you, using the outie stamp. But for the other components I want, for the gears and the watch hands, I'm going to use my innie stamp. But we're going to switch over here to a stamp that's new to Fire Mountain Gems, and we're going to use my Wings and Things stamp. So I use this for all kinds of techniques, but you can see here I've got these wonderful keys at the top, and I'm just going to cut off a little bit, a little section there, and I'm going to place it face down. I'm not going to use any release agent. It's important that the clay sticks in the stamp. And this is a great place where I can use some of that scrap clay I've been building up with the other projects I'm doing. I'm just taking a little bit of the scrap clay, making sure that that foiled piece is aligned right where I want it over the key, and I'm going to press it down firmly. You don't want too big of a chunk of clay, just enough to fill on the inside. Now sometimes you get a bonus out of this. You get another piece you can use, another embellishment. Let's see if that happens. So holding our blade, and we want a blade that's not too stiff or too flexible. We're looking for the medium blade. Holding your blade down with your right hand if you're left-handed, or your left hand if you're right-handed, and we're going to pivot very carefully. We don't want to cut ourselves. And we're going to just shave off the top and leave the clay embedded in the stamp. Now, you can see here, I can see, that's kind of cool, but we're not going to see that part. The scrap clay won't be visible from the back. What's going to happen after we bake is you're going to see the foil from the front, like there. But this is what I was talking about, that bonus. Sometimes when you do it, you have enough foil area around there, you get these little elements that's a negative of what you've just created. And I bake those too. I save them for other projects. They make nice little embellishments or inclusions in some of the projects you might make in the future. So we'll set those aside. Now after the bakes, we'll show you how they come out. But before we do that, I want to tell you how you can make rusted components. So here we go over here. Let's get another tile. Now you can see I've got some lovely foiled components right there on the corner of my tile. But over here, these look like they're ancient artifacts. And people always ask me how I get that effect. And it all begins with Swelligant. So I went ahead here and I coated some black clay pieces that I baked already. And I put a layer of Swelligant on it. And I baked it. So, sorry, Christy, I don't always follow your directions. I put them in the oven, or you can use a heat gun, because I don't want to wait hours for this to dry. And it may not be hours so much, but it might be a half an hour between layers. I want to do this very, very quickly. So I do one layer. Sometimes after baking, I let it cool, and I come back with my rust, or the iron here, and I add another layer. And I just use it with my paintbrush. But I really like to get these crusty and just looking old and ancient. So after I've baked it with one or two coats, and I come in here and I use the Tiffany green rust. Now you won't see this on camera because it takes a little while, but I just really soak those with that Tiffany green rust. If I were to let this sit and dry on its own, that's going to interact with that iron coating, and it's going to rust. It's real rust because Christie's Swelligant has real metal particles in it. But I can also go back into the oven or with my heat gun, and I can speed that process up. So sometimes I come back again and I'll add 2 or 3 layers of it. I'm actually starting to see some chemical interaction taking place here, but I like it to be faster. I'm all about the instant gratification. All right, so we're setting those aside for now, and I just want to show you an idea of how I might use these. You probably have some ideas of your own. They look really good inside of Magic Gloss, but I went ahead here. If you're like me, you've got tons of little containers around. Maybe it's an empty candy tin that you've been saving, or you bought a cool tin that you found, or even a paper mache box. You can bake that in the oven with polymer clay. But I've gone ahead here and I've already prepared a tin. I took some black clay, glued it down with my Polybonder glue, and I stippled it with some coarse sandpaper, and I baked it for a little bit. But now I need to put an embellishment on the top. So I want a background, a really visually interesting background to put my pieces in. So let's just show you a real fun way that you might create a background. And I've taken 2 pieces of clay here, the black and the white, because I want to show you something dramatic. I love the mica powders. I love to use them in my clay. And you can use any of my texture stamps you like, but I'm going to show you something kind of dramatic with my love letter. When I get my powders, I usually just work in the cap. I tap my finger. You don't want to get globs of powder on your finger. You just want to kind of have a light dusting. And look how it sticks to the surface of the stamp. If you get too much powder on your finger, it's going to fall down into the negative spaces, and it's going to come out on the clay. We just want it on the surface because we want to get an imprinted effect. So these mica powders come in all kinds of wonderful colors, and it's going to be really fun here in a second to see how it contrasts differently. It's going to be very subtle on the white clay and have a bit more impact on our black clay. Okay, that should be enough. I'm working on a piece of parchment paper here. I'm going to lay it right down on the top, and I'm going to lightly burnish with my fingers. I'm not trying to get an embossed effect. You can do that. You can take your roller and embed that and get a dimensional effect. I want a surface imprint. So let's see how that came out. Not too bad. I really am happy with that. So you can see much more obvious on the black than it is on the white. And I'm just going to wipe my fingers here with a baby wipe, and then wipe off this powder. So you can scrub these stamps. You can take them right to your sink with some dish soap. And here's a little trick. If I need to use it right away and I need it dry, which I don't in this next step, I can just put them right in my oven. And you'll smell the rubber, but it's not going to hurt the stamp. The temperature for clay is okay for the stamp. But let's show you, let's take it one notch further. You can take any kind of stamp pad ink, it doesn't matter whether it's a dye or a pigment-based ink, and you can stamp the surface of your texture, get a nice coating, and what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go right over it with the love letter. So you might want a different pattern in the background than what I did here, but this is going to be I think a cool effect anyway. So we kind of got a mirrored effect with that. I like that, a shadowed effect. But I went ahead earlier, and here's something, this is a technique I really like, and I found out by accident. I think a lot of us have had that experience. Some of the coolest things that we create were really accidents. I spilled a little mica powder on some of my clay years ago, and I just tried to wipe it off, and obviously that was just going to smear it on there, and I liked the look of it. So I just pick up a little mica powder, and I put it on the white clay before I stamped it with the love letter. Now I can just go back to my tin, take a little polybonder glue, and I don't need a lot. I just need to have a few areas for it to grab the clay, and these will bond together when they bake. You've probably seen some of my other videos, and you know that I do a lot of multiple baking with my pieces. I got this lovely deckled effect, if you're familiar with paper art, that torn paper effect, by just holding a circle cutter over this and tearing it with my craft knife. So now we're ready for the really fun part, the creative part. So we'll get all this out of our way. And I'm just going to pick up some of my findings, and you should be able to embed them without the glue, but the glue is going to help them bond a little bit better. Just a tiny dab, just so it can grab it. And once I get my pieces placed, just a dab here and a dab there. And we're not going to finish the whole thing. I'm going to keep working on this later, but just to give you some ideas, that's really fun. And let them set, and you can either with your fingers or with a small tile, you can just gently press them into place. And then lastly, to finish my piece, I would maybe do a decorative embellishment, like I used my border mold here. Oh, you want to know how to do that? Check out Fire Mountain Fixes, and I'll show you how you can get foil on a border molded piece. This would just be poly bonded right around my box. I'd have to make a second one to get all the way around. And I'd bake it, and you have a lovely treasure that you can gift or keep for yourself or even sell it. But before we go, this is the last little bit you need to know. After your stamp's cooled, and I bake these extra long in my stamp, even though the general rule of thumb is 20 minutes for every 1/4 inch of thickness, and I think you can see this isn't quite a 1/4 inch deep. I usually bake these for about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's important to use an artist quality clay like the Fimo Professional because it's very, very strong, but be sure to let the stamp cool. Sometimes these can break when they come out. Don't worry, those make excellent embellishments for corners and edges, but you're just going to gently bend the stamp in the direction that the piece is shaped, and you're going to take some tweezers. I'm taking these diamond tweezers here, and usually you can lift it right out. And let's see, we've got one more here. So this one, this round one here, I'm going to bend it from a couple of different directions. Gently and slowly, be patient. And if I'm lucky, I'm going to get those center spokes. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes they break, but sometimes I can capture them. They didn't quite come out, but you know what that is. That center, that's an opportunity for embellishment. Well, I hope you've enjoyed coming into my steampunk factory and you're excited to start your own steampunk factory. Be sure to check out all of mine and the other wonderful designer videos at firemountaingems.com, and don't forget to share these videos with all your friends on all the social networking sites we love. So, thanks for joining me and happy claying.